So I'm going to give a brief recap of exactly what alleles are, because I'm going to clear this up because I feel like people aren't really getting it, okay? So remember, it all starts with DNA. Now let's say this is every cell in your body has a full set of DNA. But remember, DNA is not one long strand, okay? DNA is actually broken up into chunks, smaller chunks. So instead of it being one long strand, it's actually broken up into chunks that we call, anybody remember what they're called? They're called chromosomes. So that's a chromosome. This is a chromosome. I'm just going to put chrome. And this is a chromosome. Now these chromosomes are numbered. Okay? Let's say you have 23 different kinds of chromosomes, but you have 2 of each, so there's 46 total. But we number them from 1 to 23 because there's it's like 23 pairs of shoes. You have pair number 1 all the way through pair number 23. And they're arranged from largest to smallest, okay? So let's say this is chromosome 1, and this is chromosome 2, and this is chromosome 3. And you'd have more after this, but we're not going to draw them all, okay? Now, each chromosome is broken up into smaller chunks that we call genes. So let's say this is gene 1 and gene number 2. Chromosome 2 might be broken up into gene 1, gene 2, and gene 3. Maybe it has 3 genes on it. Chromosome 3 may be broken up into gene 1, gene 2, gene 3, and gene 4. Maybe there's 4 genes on chromosome 3. My point is that chromosomes, which are just smaller chunks of DNA, are broken up into even smaller chunks that we call genes. And each gene controls a trait. How does it control traits? Well, inside of these genes, I'm actually going to erase trait because there's a step in between there. Genes contain these things called alleles. Okay, now the alleles are the letters that I was talking about, like big B for brown hair, little b for blonde hair, okay? That's an example of alleles. And every trait has 2 alleles, okay? So these make up traits, like let's call it hair color. Let's say big B is brown, little b is blonde. So every trait has 2 alleles, maybe big B, little b, little b, whatever. And those alleles, depending on what alleles there are, will determine what hair color or trait that you have, okay? So that's where the Punnett Squares come in. So again, the whole point of the Punnett Square is to say, okay, if this is parent number 1 has big B, little b, and parent number 2 has big B, little b, well, what could their kids be, okay? So let's work through that. Okay. Let's say big B is brown and little b is blonde. So this is parent number 1, big B, little b, and this is parent number 2 over here. Let's say that parent number 2 is actually blonde. And parent number 1, what hair color would parent number 1 have? Brown, right? Because remember, even though there's two alleles, only one of these two gets expressed, and the one that gets expressed is always the dominant one if it's there, okay? So this is, let's say this is mom over here. Only one of her two alleles, either the big B or the little b, is going to get expressed, but it's always going to be the dominant one if it's there, which is brown. So mom's got brown hair. So mom's phenotype, I'll put mom here. Mom's phenotype is brown, but her genotype, that's the letter combination. That's which allele she has, is big B, little b. Okay? So her genotype is big B, little b, her phenotype is brown. Mom's got brown hair. Dad, his genotype is little b, little b. So geno equals little b, little b. So what hair color is that? Well, only one of these two is going to get expressed, but it doesn't matter which one gets expressed because they're both blonde. So he's going to be either blonde or blonde. Those are Dad's options. He's going to be either blonde or blonde. So phenotype equals blonde. So we got a brown-haired mom and a blonde-haired dad. And if these two, with these genotypes, now if these two have kids, the possible outcomes for their kids are going to be these. So how many different possible outcomes do we have here? We have two, right? There's 4 squares, yes, but there's only 2 different letter combinations. We have big B, little b, and we have little b, little b. And how many of the 4 squares? Now this, well, let me back up. This tells you what the possibilities are for the kids. So the kids could be either this or this. But that doesn't tell you the likelihood. It doesn't tell you how likely they are to be that or that. To do that, that's when you count the squares. There's 4 squares. 2 of them are big B, little b, so 2 out of 4 is 50%. And 2 out of the 4 are little b, little b. So that's 50%. So basically, if these two guys, mom and dad, have kids, their kids have a 50-50 chance of being either brown-haired or blonde-haired. And that is it that you need to know as far as a recap. If you need more clarification, then, the video from the last lesson will help you with that. It goes in a little bit more detail about some other stuff.